Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me, and absolutely delighted and deeply honored to welcome you back to Kiski for what is a really profoundly important event. And, the Hall of Fame means so much on so many levels to Kiski, and congratulations to everyone who's going to be inducted tonight, and thank you all who made the trip tonight. It's a little chilly, it's a little cold, but that's Kiski in the latter part of the fall. We all remember it, and I know some of you guys remember playing football on those muddy days on the football field on those Saturdays where you just had to slug it out, and the boys are fortunate in the sense they don't have to play in that mud anymore because they've got that beautiful turf field. But I want to thank you all for coming, celebrating tonight together Kiski's long tradition of growing, teaching, and building superb and exceptionally talented student athletes. It's been going on for a long time, and really happy to do it again, and really just thankful and joyful that we can do it in person tonight. It broke our hearts not to do it last year, and we are so looking forward to seeing you all for this event, and I thank you for being here. I would be remiss, terribly remiss, if I didn't first of all thank our Hall of Fame committee. These guys do a great job, very quietly, working behind the scenes to make sure this event comes off so well each year. So I'd like to thank Chris Spawn, Mary Grace Muster, Vicki Fluharty, Mark Roadhamel, Damian Williams, and Dr. Craig for getting this all together for us. We pulled it off every year. It goes really well, and they do a great job working behind the scenes. So let's give them a big round of applause. Very quickly, don't worry, we're not coming after your wallets tonight. I want to thank you for your support. It's what allows these great buildings to stand. It's what allows these great students to flourish and go on and do wonderful things for the state, the country, and the world. It's because of your support and your dedication to the annual fund and our capital campaign projects, and we thank you for your loyalty to Kiski. The one thing I do want to ask of you, a special favor to all of us. You're going to get an update tonight from our head of school, Chris Bruningsson. You're here to take in the weekend. You're going to see great things on campus all over the place. The thing I ask of you, the favor I ask of you is spread that good word for us, that great things are happening at Kiski. Your powerful network brings people back to Kiski. You bring people to our admissions office. You bring people to support our advancement efforts, and we can't do it without you. So I wish you all a great weekend, and please spread the word for us, and we're here to help you. If you need anything else, anything at all, let us know, okay? And I would like to introduce our head of school, Chris Bruningsson, who has an update for all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to welcome all of you, and a special congratulations to all of our inductees tonight for our Kiski 2021 Hall of Fame. We're so happy to have all of you back. I have a quick update, very brief update about the school. School year is off to a fantastic start. We have not required students to be vaccinated, but 90% of our community is vaccinated, and so we've had no positive cases all year. I should be rubbing a rabbit's foot when I say that, probably, but except for the mask mandate, indoor mask mandate for students that was issued by the governor of Pennsylvania, everything feels very, very much back to normal. So right in here in Rogers, we're back to having student assemblies, and we're doing a lot of outdoor activities this fall. As you'll see tomorrow, athletics is completely back to normal, playing a normal schedule again. And we've had great results athletically so far. Cross-country team won the county championships. Football's having a really good season, 4-2, going into their big game with Hill School tomorrow. Soccer's having a phenomenal season. We beat Hill, Mercersburg, University School, and another school that some of you might be familiar with called Shady Side Academy. right. Oh no, that always gets applause. And so they're playing. We've been going on the national rankings on Max Prep, flipping back and forth between Western Reserve Academy and Kiski as the #1 team, and we're playing Western Reserve tomorrow, so that's going to be a really good soccer game. We had a rough year last year, like all boarding schools did, right? With parents understandably wanting to keep their kids at home, they didn't want their kids being away during a pandemic, and so we had a dip in enrollment. And we had a big gap to make up with our budget, and about $1.5 million, and we raised that much and a little bit more. So we finished with a positive result last year, and this last admission cycle, we had phenomenal results, really thanks to our new director of admission, Bramble Buren. She's back there. Why don't you stand up for a second, Bram? And so we opened this year, bounced right back to 190. So we were thinking it would take a couple years to recover, but thankfully we're back. Last year we had 140 boys on campus. The rest were participating remotely. And so now we have the full 100% are in person. Last year, despite the pandemic, we ran our programs, athletic and academic programs all year long. We didn't have any outbreaks or shutdowns or interruptions in our programs whatsoever. And we're really proud of that. But this year, like I said, we're feeling a lot more back to normal. We also credit that the great application numbers and enrollment numbers with our tuition reset, which you might have read about in the alumni bulletin or heard about, which we did 2 years ago, where we dropped our tuition to be 20% lower than the national average for boarding schools. And that's really generated a lot of buzz. We were the first boarding school in the country to do it, and now there have been a couple dozen others that have followed our lead over the past few years. And if you're looking at the average tuition for boarding schools, in case you're out of touch with this, you may remember what tuition was when you were students, right? But the average is about $65,000 a year for boarding schools. So our tuition is under 50, but that's really been getting a lot of traction. And so, like Steve was saying, the best thing that you can do for us is talk about Kiski and promote us. And certainly, if you know any families who might be compatible for Kiski, send them our way. We'd love to talk to them. We're so grateful for everything you do for us, and we are honored to be able to honor you tonight. So congratulations to our inductees. I'll hand things off to our athletic director, Chris Spahn.
Good evening. I'll just add my welcome to everyone. We haven't had an event like this since 2019, so let's get everybody back. I'll start by introducing our first individual inductee, a Kiski legend, Mr. Glenn Ballard, from the class of 1951. Mr. Ballard's not able to join us this evening, but he sent along recorded remarks. His interviewer for the video is his son, Glenn Ballard Jr. Following the recording, Mr. Ballard's daughter, Tracy Krofchek, with us to add those acceptance remarks. It's interesting to note that the majority of Mr. Ballard's recorded remarks are regarding the Kiski faculty who guided him during his time as a student and the inspiration that his time at Kiski provided him as he embarked on his own career path. Please allow me to do a little bragging on his behalf. Like many athletes of that Kiski era, Glenn Ballard was versatile, playing multiple sports. What made him exceptional was the high level at which he succeeded in sports as different as football, baseball, swimming, and diving. Further, he was simply a great football halfback. He was a defensive back, the place kicker, and punt returner. He didn't simply win swimming events, he also won diving events in the same meet. This was all before he went on to become one of the most highly respected teachers, coaches, and heads of school. In fact, he personally helped to build the baseball field you all drove past on your way onto campus. Mr. Ballard's plaque reads, "Before Glenn Ballard, class of 1951, became a legendary head of school at Brownwell Tabbitt, Hockaday, Kincaid, and Holland Hall. He was a versatile athlete and astute student at Kiski. He excelled on Kiski's football, swimming, and diving and baseball teams. Mr. Ballard attended Brown University on a football scholarship before an injury brought him home, where he finished his undergraduate degree at the University of Pittsburgh. Mr. Ballard earned his master's degree in math and philosophy at the University of Denver. He returned to serve on the Kiski faculty in an effort to give back some of what the school had given to him in both athletics and academics. He was a great coach. It was known as a demanding but fair math teacher who put learning first.
Okay, Dad, tell us how you got to Kiski.
It was Glenn Wild's father,
Yeah.
who was an All-American football player.
Yeah?
And Glenn Wild Jr. was a dear friend of mine, and he was a great athlete. That's how I got involved with Kiski.
He recommended you.
Yeah,
And what did Kiski mean to you, Dad?
everything, because here I was such a callow youth, and now I had the opportunity to, well, what was wonderful about it was that most of the faculty were men who had served in the Second World War, and they're just an extraordinary number of men.
Yeah.
And I just, here I was so callow and unknowing, and here were these wonderful, really American heroes who were in the faculty there. And what a difference they made. It seemed to me that almost every day, one or another of the faculty members had me by the elbow, leading me off someplace and advising me about something that I should be doing better.
Yeah. And how did it set you up?
Oh, it was a life that I never would have had without that.
Showed you a way of life, huh?
Well, it did indeed, because I had no idea about things like that. And here I had this extraordinary opportunity to be in a school with truly American heroes in the Second World War.
And it made all the difference.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah. And then you decided you needed to come back and pay it back.
Well, that's exactly right. After I graduated from college, I honestly had this feeling that at that point I had opportunities and really some promising things to do. And yet I thought, I owe all this to Kiski, which gave me a life. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to go back there and see if I can spend at least a year with them by way of saying thanks.
And you end up staying 10 years.
Yeah, and I did, and of course got married after the first year there. Ann and I were married, and we raised our children there.
Yeah, I think I was born in Kiski and spent a lot of time in the dorm room.
Yes, you did.
I remember you said, Ballard, put down your sucky and go in at left end, right? Anyway, how did it lead to your other headmasterships?
Well, I'm uncertain now, but I just loved the school life, and I decided at some point early on that I was going to be a head of school, and ended up running two of the great independent schools in America, probably the outstanding girls' school in America, Hockaday Independent Schools, and then I was also head of Kincaid, of course, later. So I just felt so fortunate to have ended up as headmaster. I remember very early on when I was beginning to see possibilities, and it was occurring to me that maybe I could make a life out of school life.
And would any of that happen without going for a PG year at Kiski?
No, none of it would have happened. Oh, it's just such a fortunate experience, really. It just gave me a life.
Made all the difference.
Now let's invite Tracy to the podium.
Well, my brother made So I didn't have to say much, and I'm glad about that. My family is so gratified by this occasion. My father valued his time at Kiski above all things. He was head of school, having been mentored here at Kiski, of course, by Jack Pigeon when he returned as a member of the faculty. The cornerstone of Daddy's schools was always athletics, and he learned that here at Kiski. Daddy became a private pilot in his later years, in his years at Kincaid, and he used to fly his plane to different sporting events all over the country as Kincaid kids traveled to play. And he took great pride in that. He truly enjoyed it. He's sorry that he can't be here with us tonight. He has gotten older, as have we all, and is unfortunately not traveling as much anymore. But we are just so in awe of the fact that Kiski remembers Dad as well as you do. It would be meaningful to him to know how many people came and spoke to me today. And I will be sure and share that with him. People who remembered Dad, who remembered specific things that Dad was able to do for them while they were here, and both as a fellow student and as a teacher. Daddy was foremost a teacher all his career, and he also did a yeoman's job of building campuses at both Kincaid and Hockaday. We were the fortunate beneficiary of Dad's charm. I often said that Dad was charming for a living, and it seems to me that he was. But, one of the things that Daddy always did was he wrote each student a handwritten birthday card every year, all the 18 years he was at Kincaid. And that served him well. He also used to stand at the front door of the school and shake hands as the kids came in for the day. And many kids remember that fondly to me today. I thank you so much for being here and for honoring my father. And I know he will be happy to know that many of you remembered him to me. And I thank you. This one?
Yeah, this one here, then you'll get this one tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, I won't get it. Can I take it today? Yeah, I'm happy to be here, y'all. Thanks.
Our next inductee will actually enter the hall twice this evening, both as an individual and as a member of the 1970-71 basketball team. Peter Martorelli was a standout during a golden era for Kiski athletics. He started for multiple teams before becoming a college legend as a catcher for the University of Pittsburgh. He is forever immortalized there by an engraved stone placed along the famed varsity walk between the Cathedral of Learning and the Hines Memorial Chapel on Pitt's campus. At the time of his Pitt graduation, he ranked 4th all-time with a .497 on-base percentage, which means he was on base half the time. His plaque reads, Peter Martorelli, class of 1971, was one of the most dominant athletes of his era. He earned 11 varsity letters in football, basketball, and baseball. He captained each team his senior year. Mr. Martorelli played center and linebacker on the football team and led the basketball team to Kiski's first interstate prep school league championship. Rated as one of the best high school catchers in Pennsylvania, he accepted a scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh, where he started all 4 years, capping the Panthers his junior and senior seasons. He won Pitt's prestigious Blue Gold Award in 74-75, giving Anna to the best student athlete. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Peter Martorelli. a picture first? Let's take a picture first. Is that all right? Absolutely. Yep.
Good evening. When I found out that I was being inducted to the Kiski Hall of Fame, the first one was the basketball, the 1971 championship team. And I'm thinking, what words can I share to people what Kiski meant to me? My speech tonight will be about the influence that many of the Kiski faculty had on me, my coaches, and just some of the faculty that I really didn't have in class or have on the field, but it really empowered me as an individual to go on and live a life that I would say that I'm proud of what I've accomplished. It is truly an honor to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. This night ranks right up there with the birth of my children and my grandchildren. I would like to congratulate all the honorees who are here tonight for this special occasion. But also being honored with the basketball team probably means as much to me as individually. My basketball career started pretty slow, but as we moved our way through the junior and senior year, and the players that came on board, we were able to win the first 1971 inter-state prep league. And many of the people who are here tonight, people I haven't seen in 50 years, so I'm very honored to be here with them tonight. I would also like to thank the Hall of Fame committee. I didn't know before who they were until Steve mentioned some of them. Chris and the Kiski administration and what they've done to this fine school, and all the people who had a decision in this event. I'd also like to thank Mark and Vicky, who had to put up with me a little bit about what picture do I use. It's on the well, I didn't want an old picture of me as a 60 to 70-year-old person, so I asked them to use my senior picture yearbook. I couldn't find any headshots. I had one from Pitt that it was a baseball shot, and they couldn't minimize it enough. But I do want to thank you both for all your help through this process. Two other people that I want to acknowledge tonight, and part of it is because of the legacy they have continued that their parents done. Steve Szilagyi. Steve, I believe, was probably born when I was a junior or senior, to Thomas, and Bridget. The Szilagyi's were probably the kindest people on the campus. I never had Tom in class. Didn't see Bridget as much as some of the other faculty wives at dinner because of obviously having a newborn. But they were always special in my heart. I remember years after I came up, I was working baseball camps at Kiski, and I would see Tom, and we all sit down and have a beer and talk. He would tell me stories. Half of them I couldn't understand what he was saying, but he always had that smile, and it really meant a lot to me. So I wanted to say something about Steve and what, obviously, him being here as long as he has, continuing his parents' legacy. The other one is Mary Grace Muster, Lejos. Mary Grace was, I think, is Mary Grace here?
Yeah,
Up top. 12, 13, I don't know. But what I remember about Mary Grace, trying to get the Kiski boys' attention, I think she was a little too young for, the upperclassmen. But she always had this infectious smile, that she was always smiling, no matter where Mary Grace would go. Always tagging along with her parents, Zach and Mary. And so I also wanted to thank you for what you've done for Kiski and continue your parents' legacy. Zach and Mary Vlahos were an interesting couple for me. Zach, I know, again, another one I've never had in class. I don't know if they taught all the advanced classes, and I was never in them. But Zach was, a history teacher, and he liked to talk baseball. And I remember many times after the meals, we'd sit down, and he would talk to me. But Mary was the one that got me to take a class that I had no business taking. I think Kiski started a music program, and I believe it was the first class ever. And she asked me, "Why didn't you take it?" And I'm thinking, Mary, back then it was Mrs. Vlahos, I have no talent. I can't read music. I don't play an instrument. And she said, well, it's a music appreciation. So I took it, and there were 4 of us. All the other 3 were musicians. One's father, Eddie Eckstein, his father, Billy, was a jazz musician. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I think my music, before I came to Kiski, my dad allowed me guitar lessons, and I think that lasted 2 weeks, and then basketball started, so I gave it up. But Mary got me into the class, and she never made me feel like, what are you doing here? And I always appreciated that. So again, Mary Grace, your parents were great. Thank you. I'd like to also, the most important people in my life, obviously my family. I'd like to share this with them. My wife, Kathy, my son, Marty, my daughter, Caitlin, my son-in-law, Will, and my daughter-in-law, Hannah. Now, my 3 grandchildren couldn't come. They were a little young, and we were afraid that they would make too much noise, but I know they're here in spirit, Leah, Emma, and Mario. Thank you guys for being here tonight. So we all have a journey why we came to Kiski. I know some of the people that I were here, probably their stories are even crazier than mine. But my journey started in the early 60s. My father was a high school football coach and teacher at North Hills High School. He brought his team up to play Kiski and to play Jack Pigeon's team. And it was unusual back then in the 60s for public schools to play private schools. But for some reason, it was on the schedule. So me being probably 10 years old at that time, I was the ball boy, always traveled with my parents, my father's team. So we come up to Kiski. And, I remember Kiski, a campus being this young. I remember there was a field, like where the golf course, and a house in the middle, which was the Anacini house, who we got to know the family that lived there. It's been taken down many years ago. And there was one other thing I remembered, all these pine trees that lined Kiski. And that, I will tell a little story what that meant to me as I came as a student. But so that was my introduction to Kiski. And my dad's relationship started with Jack Pigeon then. Then it wasn't long where my time came. And my dad saying that, being an educator, being a coach of football, recognized what Kiski did to young men. The curriculum, the opportunity to live in a 7-day boarding school. Yes, I said 7-day boarding school is built, it's built on brotherhood, community, and it's something he wanted for me. And my parents, obviously, like many of us, couldn't afford Kiski. So with Jack Pigeon, and I'm sure this goes on every year, he made my parents' dream for me to come, and I said my parents' dream for me to come to Kiski, an opportunity by helping us out financially. The one thing my parents did miss was the day-to-day seeing of their son growing up, and I'm sure most parents who send their kids to a boarding school miss that part of them, so I know they sacrificed a lot of that. So I get here, and it's 7-day boarding school. Okay, I didn't know a lot of things about it because I really wanted to go to Shadyside, because, well, It was closer. It was a 5-day boarding school. But there was a teacher at Shadyside who was their football coach. And he said he was going to Kiski. So with my dad's relationship with Jack Pigeon from him coming up here and talking to Jack over the years, a gentleman named Tony Body was a math teacher and a football coach at Shadyside. So he talked my dad into, well, why don't you look at Kiski? So obviously my dad knew some of Kiski, but we took the entrance exam. I was hoping I wouldn't do as well, so maybe I didn't have to go. But when it came to it, obviously, I entered as a freshman. And the people that mean a lot to me through Kiski, most of them aren't here. Jack Pigeon, obviously, to many of us, was the most influential. And at times tonight, if I get emotional, it's only because I remember some of the things that these people have done for me and what they meant to me. But Jack had an influence of all young men, and I'm sure Chris has his influence with over the years with his students. And his whole demeanor. I mean, you did it Jack's way. Let's face it. But, you were scared of him. You loved him at times. You had to go and get your grades from him and sit down with him. And at that time, it was Reno Diorio, our assistant headmaster, and they go through your grades and, give you a little update. We didn't get written report cards per se. They did send some things home, but Jack was Kiski. When we were here, a lot of us in the 60s, we didn't have these beautiful buildings. I mean, most of the buildings that I remember are gone. Excuse me. The financial state of Kiski, I think, not that I knew a lot because I was only, a young kid, but I think there were some issues, and they had to fight through a lot to get Kiski where it is today. But it's funny. I used to see Jack after I graduated. I never called him Jack. I am tonight, but it was always Mr. Pigeon. And I came up to one of the games. It was probably 4 or 5 years. Well, it was probably longer now. It was when my son was in elementary school, and he said, well, where's your son going to school? I said, well, right now he's going to Shadyside Academy in elementary school. And Pigeon didn't talk to me for about 3 years after that. But he was a great man to me, and I'm sure to a lot of you. I'd like to tell you that I was excited to come to Kiski. But actually, it was the opposite. I really didn't want to leave home. I was at a school district. It was now Pine Richland, but it was called Richland. They had a football team that I was on through like middle school or junior high school, and we had pretty good players. And I knew that as we would go up, we would probably be pretty good and maybe vie for a championship. So, and they did go on my sophomore and junior year to win the WPL championships. But that was one of the reasons I didn't want to leave. Also the all-male boarding school, kind of hard to sell a 14, 15-year-old. Coats and ties everywhere. We had to wear coat and tie to all 3 meals, everywhere you went. And for someone that didn't wear ties very often, that obviously was a shock. The 2-hour study halls that we had every night for 5 days a week. And then the most important, of course, is what? No girls. I mean, that was obviously the other thing. You came to an all-male boarding school, and it was not having the female was very difficult for some of us. So then I started my football career. I came as a freshman. I think I came a few days early before camp, and started practicing. Still not quite sure this is where I wanted to be. being homesick like many people are when they're away the first time. Started practicing, and then I get into my first game. I think Steve Sue and I were talking about this a little bit earlier about the teams we played. So our first game, we traveled to Gilmore Academy in Ohio. I don't think it was on the rickety black bus that Jake Ziegler used to drive. I think we actually had a cruise line bus. We got up there and playing. Little did we know, or did I know, this Gilmore team was, I think, one of the top teams in Ohio that year. They had a number of Division I players. So we go up, it's 90-some degrees. We're wearing our all-black uniform. There's probably 30 on our team. Obviously the numbers weren't here at Kiski to have that many. So we started with 30 players. Well, we ended up, I think, with like 12, 13 players. The score was 55, I think, to 0. I remember thinking, what am I doing here? My gosh. And I remember after the game, I saw my parents, and I went up to them and I begged them, can I come home? I said, I'll study harder. I'll do all the things that we tell tell your parents. But of course, my parents said no. They always believed when you start something, you finish. And I am so grateful that they didn't allow me to come home with them, because I wouldn't have had an opportunity that I've had of a lifetime here at Kiski. As football, as I talked a little about my football experience, we weren't very good the first couple of years. We won a few games. But as I became a junior and senior, our teams got better. Our coach, Reno Diorio, was a new coach my freshman year, so obviously he got better as a coach. I would like to think of our football teams that we paved the way for the teams that won the Interstate League, I think in 74, 78, and 79. So they did have some successful football teams. Then I went on to my basketball career. As a freshman, I played freshman basketball. I really didn't want to. I thought, I could play JV. But I was with my dorm mates and everything, so I played freshman. There was one game that I remember vividly, and it's something that turned out to be a great thing. We're playing Wilkins Junior High School, and it's part of the Churchill School District. They had this cocky left-handed guard. The kind of player, your opponent, that you don't like because you think they're cocky and they talk a lot. So, we were losing, and we had a team that had a lot of bulk. We weren't real good shooters, but we could foul pretty good. Is it the best of them? So I thought maybe this little guard needs a little more extra bump. Well, I did it, and he broke his ankle. Little did I know this cocky little guard would show up on Kiski's campus the next year. And this gentleman has been one of my best friends since. David Martha showed up that day. And it's funny, he still blames me for his football career at Pitt that he couldn't play because I broke his ankle. But I am blessed to have him as a close friend. Then as my basketball career went by, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up my 5-minute allotment, folks. I was going to keep it short, but I figured, what the heck. Everybody gets their 15 minutes or 5 minutes of fame, whatever. My basketball career started off okay, but my senior year is when it all came together. I mean, tonight you'll see the nucleus of our basketball team is here. my role on the team was I played defense pretty well, rebound, fouled. I wasn't much of a shooter, but we had some underclassmen who could shoot. We had a guard, Andy Tonzik, who was quick, could lead the offense, along with David, Martha. Then we had a shooter, Jeff Massey, who came from Churchill also later on in his junior year. And then the real piece of the puzzle was Artie Masidas came. He was a Navy recruit, came his senior year, and he was the complete basketball player. He was truly a basketball player. He could rebound, dribble, shoot. He could do it all. But there was one thing we still needed, and that was a coach. And this gentleman, Bob Cribbs, came back to Kiski and coached me on our team my senior year, and that's all we needed. And we went on to win the first interstate prep league. I always tell people that back in the 60s and 70s, when there was truly an interstate prep league, that it was much more difficult to win games. I had two nephews who played up at Kiski, and they were inducted into the 88-89 baseball Hall of Fame. And I said, yeah, but when you played, the prep league wasn't as tough. Of course, sounding old like we all do, and how we exaggerate the facts a little bit. But my basketball career obviously ended on a very high note. Lastly, as a baseball player, my father thought that could be my best sport, that I could excel at. That's one of the other reasons I came to Kiski. Richland didn't have a baseball program, so that was the carrot he gave me. Like, you can play baseball at a high school, you won't miss a season. And coming up, probably a lot of you couldn't see it, or if you haven't been here before, Kiski had one of the finest, and does have one of the finest baseball facilities. When I remember back in the 60s, most fields were, not taken care of, was typical high school field. But when you came up to Kiski and played, the manicure infield, the whole outfield, it was immaculate. The other thing it made me become was a very good defensive catcher. Kiski's backstop was so different than most high schools. It was like 40, 50 feet behind you as a catcher. And if you didn't block the ball, well, obviously people would steal a base or take two bases. So it really did make me a better catcher by having that backstop so far. And then I think I developed the good enough skills to go on and play at the Division I level. And it was very, very appreciative of what Kiski did for me baseball-wise. We had very good teams when I was here in baseball. We just never got over the hump to win the championship. My coach, the first 2 years, was Bob Johnson, who was elected into the Hall of Fame a few years ago. Bob was a taskmaster. But he knew his fundamentals. He would keep us out there 2 or 3 hours doing situational baseball. And for some of you who don't know what that is, we would go out as 9 players, the infield, the outfield, and everybody else would have to run the bases. And he would use his fungo and say, okay, nobody out, and then he hits the ball somewhere, and you have to play the position and would make the correct throw. Well, we would do this for 2 or 3 hours. For me, it wasn't too bad. All I had to do was catch the ball when it came in and hand it to him so he hit the ball. But the rest of my teammates are running and running. But that was him. And, if he did something wrong, Carl Kellnell reminded me of something that I can't remember, he threw a bat because the weight of the bat he didn't like. But Bob really made a real effort to get the best he could out of us. And I'm sure he's winning championships and arguing with umpires in heaven. One last thank you. Obviously, beside my parents, there's no other person who had more of an influence on me in my life at Kiski. Reno DiOrio came, as I said, he was my head coach my 4 years at Kiski, and he was my baseball coach the last 2 years. and he's been a long-time friend to this day. I can't thank him enough for his guidance, his discipline. And his discipline was, I was never on the end of his discipline, but there are many, some sitting in this room remember his discipline. He made me a better athlete, but more importantly, a better person. He was a great friend. And little did I know that Reno, after I graduated, always would call my dad. You know, my dad gave up his football career when I started at Kiski, stopped coaching. But Reno would call him every Monday, talk to him. You know, they'd go over how'd the game go. And he became a real close friend with my father, and I really appreciated that. Probably the true, beside tonight, the proudest night or moment at Kiski for me wasn't winning awards or being elected a prefect. Jack Pigeon, and I'm sorry if I get too emotional, Jack Pigeon asked my father to speak at the senior parent night. I can remember my dad being so emotional and anxious about speaking to this group, and I couldn't understand. You know, he spoke at a lot of school functions, coaching clinics. I mean, he ran assemblies, he did all that. But the significance of Jack asking him to talk to the parents was something that probably meant more to him than anything else. And he would even tell you that if he was here today, even more so than having a stadium named after him after he passed away. It was speaking to parents at Kiski. And this summer we had our 50th reunion. And one of the guys, one of my old-time classmates, who probably was one of the biggest jokester at Kiski, was probably thrown out of Kiski more than anybody. And he was threatened, let me put it that way, he was thrown out of Kiski. He said to me when we were sitting out on the lawn, he said, "Hey, Pete, do you remember your dad's talk?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "The last line I remember." He said, "I always think your dad when that," he said. So my dad ended his talk. He thanked Mr. Pigeon. He said, "Jack," or he called him Mr. Pigeon, "4 years ago I gave you a boy. Tonight you are giving back a man." Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry if I overwent my 5 minutes. I'm sure I did, but I appreciate it very much.
Our final individual inductee is Jim Garland from Kiski's class of 1983. One of the inaugural 2013 Athletic Hall of Fame inductees was two-time gold medalist Bob Mathias from Kiski's class of 1949. Bob Mathias and Jim Garland are the only athletes on the top 10 all-time track performances for 4 events. That's incredible company to keep. Jim Garland was a scoring force for the Cougars, culminating with his senior year when he tallied scoring finishes in all 8 of his cross-country races and won 17 more races on the track in the spring. His plaque reads, Jim Garland, class of 1983, still held 4 top 10 all-time track and field performances for Kiski at the time of his induction. He was listed among the greats in the 800, 1600, and 3200 events, and his 4x800 relay team held the top time. He earned all-league honors for cross-country and turned in the 6th fastest time ever recorded on Kiski course. The senior track and field captain won the 1600 and 800 at the league championship meet. He continued his athletic career at Wittenberg University, where he was a 4-year letterman in cross-country and track, and was captain of both teams. Following college, Mr. Garland embarked on a successful triathlon career. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jim Garland.
Well, good evening. Oh, I'm sorry. Good evening. First thing I'd like to say, I'd like to do something about that hair back in the day. 40 years ago, but first, really, I appreciate this. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, words can't express the gratitude that I feel right now, and I'd like to appreciate everyone that's gotten me up here on this stage. But first, I'd like to recognize my family. My family is here, and a special shout out to my wife. 24 years, and she deserves her own plaque. Believe me. But I'll continue. You know, when I came here, my brother and I came here for Kiski summer camp in 1978. And if you don't remember, that was a 6-week summer camp. Your parents came to visit after 4 weeks, and our parents were AWOL. And also our parents thought it would be a good idea for us to get tutored in Spanish with Mr. John Lombardo. I don't know if he's here tonight. Are you here, Mr. Lombardo? Okay, not. But yeah, for 1 hour, our free time, he tutored us in Spanish all summer, 6 weeks. And the one thing that stands out about him is he had a daughter, Christina. She was probably 2 or 3, and we were in the lawn chair back in Factory Row behind his house, and he was tutoring us in Spanish, and his daughter ran out the door. Jerry, his wife, came running after him, and she ran up and jumped in his lap. And the expression on that guy's face, I mean, still is in my memory. The smile and the heartfelt, and my daughter's here with me now, and she did that the same, and it's been with me forever. So, you know, the mentoring I got here, you know, Tony Landau, my roommate for 2 years. It's been 25, 30 years maybe since I've seen you, and I appreciate it. My brother Dave that went with me, he was behind me all 4 years here, but you know, you guys came at the right time. You know, father figures, mentors, guidance, the advice, everything that Pete said, I mean, is true. It changed me. It put us on the right path, and it's gotten us where we are now. You know, I'm not perfect, and I'll never be, but you guys, this institution, the faculty of the past, I'll never forget. I still know the names and everything, and it's just amazing. But the one person, Doug Yoder, you here? Oh, no. But anyway, Doug Yoder, my mentor, my coach. Doug Yoder, we were, I think it was McClintock, whatever the school building is. It's back by the ravine. And sophomore year, we were in class, and I look out, and there's this Weimaraner dog limping on 3 legs, chasing this long-haired guy in a running outfit. And I just didn't get it. And I went out for track, and Doug talked to me, coached me. He never ran track before, and he had Tony and I start with hurdles on the cinder track, and we fell. Mrs. McAtee would scrub out the cinders and put the, I forget what, the orange stuff that burns. Starts with it, yeah, that, and painful. But, you know, Doug's dog, the Weimaraner, was shot by a hunter's arrow. He found it injured, he adopted it, and that dog would run with us and stop at the trees and come back home. And I thought that was pretty cool. And after Doug and I got together and became friends, and you know, he gave me his running spikes from IUP to run in at the time, and I cherish those spikes. I think I wore them all the way through junior year of college. They were blue Asics suede with the white stripes and did not look at all like something I should wear. But anyway, you know, look at my hair. But yeah, that guy changed me, along with the faculty, the Vallejoses, and I could go down the list, the past faculty. All those guys touched me. My brother, Tony, every person, and they cared. Just like Pete said, you know, you'd get your grades from Mr. Pigeon, and me, I was the king of early study hall. So my study hall started at 7 o'clock and ended at 9:30, and lights out at 10:15. That was me. And Mr. Pigeon always encouraged me. you know, you'll get there. Just keep trying. You're doing the right thing. You know, you're on the right, and that's what got me through. And with all the faculty here, and I wouldn't be here, you know, now if it wasn't for them. It wasn't for my parents deciding to send me here, and you know, I just don't know what else to say. It's been great. And Doug Yoder, with his coaching, his advice, you know, steeplechase was my thing in college, and you know, the toughness that Doug Yoder gave me, we'd go on those 10-mile runs, and he'd talk the whole time, you know, right by my side, in my ear, just, you know, I don't feel like talking, you know, I don't feel like communicating. Can I? Yeah, and he would. He'd just rattle off. And the other amazing thing about him, I always remember when we had cross-country meets, we'd run up the summer camp hill, that gravel road where that big log cabin was, and the little cabins where we stayed right by the ski slope. It was a 2.5-mile course, or 2-mile course, I think, and Doug Yoder would be at every stop. That guy would run 50 miles during the cross country, and he would meet me and cheer me on every time can you give me a break? You know, come on, you know, but that's how he was. And, you know, with his leadership, his mentoring, it still means a lot to me. And I hope I carried it to my daughters, my daughter and other daughter and granddaughter that aren't here, my sister that's not here. You know, I hope I instilled some of that into them. But Pete, hey man, that was great. I wish I could have your notes and read the same thing up here. That was awesome. But again, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
The first team I'll introduce is the 1969 golf team. Back then, golf was a spring sport, and according to the season recap in the 1969 Spring Kiski Bulletin, golf was almost discontinued. Kiski wasn't sure of making the move to fall competition. This team may have given them reason to reconsider after compiling an undefeated season. They possess a consistency and depth that is unheard of in the game of golf, where an off day or even a single bad shot can sink a round and a season. The 1969 golf team plaque reads, "The preview for the 1969 golf season predicted that Kiski had the determination, talent, and experience necessary for a winning season. However, all the Cougars did was win as they completed a 12-0 slate. Along with the aforementioned traits, the team benefited from incredible depth. The steady play necessary to win can be elusive during any given round, but the Kiski golfers managed to maintain consistency for a full season. Multiple teammates garnered top medalist honors. Players from this storybook team went on to compete in college and later on the state and national levels." I'd like to invite Coach Jackson Blair to the podium to deliver acceptance remarks on behalf of this team. After his remarks, I'd like the team to join us on the stage for a photo. But first, ladies and gentlemen, Jackson Blair.
Well, this is a nice homecoming for me. I apologize that my wife and I didn't make the reception. It would have had special meaning for us. I arrived here in 1965, right out of Allegheny College, and I am today the poster boy for back problems, so I apologize for having to be seated. I resided in the freshman dorm. I think that was because I wasn't too far removed in age from the seniors, so Mr. Pigeon decided freshmen would probably be best. In 1968, I brought my young bride to Kiski, and Mr. Pigeon moved us to Wilson Hall, where you all had a reception tonight. I can tell you that when we moved into Wilson, it represented what could best be described as a tenement. And fortunately, 53 years later, my wife is still with me. She didn't mind the conditions that most of the campus housing were in at that time. We were still here when Mr. Pigeon started building his Ryan homes and improving campus housing. And Chris, I must tell you, having not been back to the school for a long time, what a difference the facilities are now that the students and the faculty enjoy. It was very emotional for me tonight to see Mr. Ballard, Glenn and his wife Ann, and Bob and Ruth Johnson, and Zach Playos and his family. All were part of our social structure and visited us off campus, and we just had a wonderful time, and I wasn't expecting all of this tonight. It brought back great memories. Great school, and not surprised to see the improvement in admission structure. Anyway, I want to tell you, as a young college graduate, I came here all excited about teaching history, and I was called into Mr. Pigeon's home office, and he said, "Jack, we've decided that you will be an assistant coach of the JV football team." And I said, "Well, Mr. Pigeon, I never played football." He said, "I didn't ask you to play." He said, "You will be understudying Bob Johnson. He's a great coach, and he'll tell you what you need to do." And I immediately thought, obviously you don't know that I know Mr. Johnson never played football. But obviously I knew that Bob mastered everything he was asked to do, and that it would be fun. And so I became a football coach. And I'll never remember the first day of practice. Somebody said, "Coach," and I heard somebody say, "Coach," and somebody said, "Coach," and I finally realized they were talking to me. So I found out standing on a sled with a whistle in your mouth, dressed in football clothes, was really okay. I'd blow the whistle, they pushed me all over the field. And my other duties were to run the chains at the varsity football game, so I had one of the best seats on the field. So I wasn't too surprised come spring. Mr. Pigeon called me in and he said, "Jack, I've decided that your assignment will be to be the varsity golf team coach." And I said, "Mr. Pigeon, I play golf, but I don't play it well." He said, "I didn't ask you to play golf." He said, "I'm giving you a team of guys that from the time they were very small in their home communities were taking golf lessons from some of the finest golf pros in the country. And they've been playing with their dads, and they're really good. Stay out of their way. Drive them to the games, take attendance, pat them on the back when they play well. You're going to see some fantastic golf. And just cheer them on." Well, doggone, they were undefeated by the end of the season. And I had to play with the other golf coaches, and I was not undefeated by the end of the season. So 50-some years later, I get a letter from Kiski telling me that we're all going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So I can't talk for 5 minutes. All I can tell you is I'm going to see some guys that are 50 years older than they were when I was driving them to all these games, and I'm excited to see them. And my wife and I are so sorry that we didn't get to see our first home as newlyweds by being able to attend the reception. But this is a wonderful honor, and it's great to see some of the old faculty members that we love so much. And I will tell you one thing that Mr. Pigeon did. He saw promise in teachers, whether they were former golfers, former football players, or whatever. It was whether you could encourage and mentor. I have an idea that his philosophy was, if you're 4 years older than the guy in your class, and I ask you to teach him history, and you weren't a history major, it doesn't matter. All you have to do is stay ahead of them, encourage them, and help them in other ways. I've always regarded him as a masterful mentor and encourager. And I learned by working in sports, and I'm not an athlete, that he had a good philosophy. And I've followed it all through my life and my career in education. I've been a headmaster, an assistant headmaster, director of admissions. I worked on Wall Street for a long, long time. My wife retired as an associate head of school. And all of these talents really came from having Jack as a mentor. Anyway, thank you very much for this honor, and I'm waiting to see my team. I'm guessing that they've been as successful in life as they were here at Kiski. Thank you.
If the members of the team would come up to the stage, please.
Where's Matt?
Yeah, don't drop that. You don't want to drop that. Gentlemen, if you slide down this way, we'll have a back, back.
Where's Sims?
Yeah, I remember that convertible. Smoking that pipe, remember that pipe?
I get over this railing, I'll be okay.
All right.
We had some good times, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, I'll catch you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
My wife.
I think he's coming.
I've lost my script, everybody. I've lost my script. Yeah, thank you. I don't know where I did. I just made pockets there. My chair got moved. Thank you, Mark. The second team I am pleased to introduce is the 1970-71 basketball team. Had it not been for a handful of key injuries, I may be introducing our second undefeated team. These Cougars overcame those early challenges and finished with one of the most coveted distinctions in sports, that of first ever. Their plaque reads, in their third season of full membership in Interstate Prep School League, the Kiski basketball program captured its first league championship. In fact, the team's only 2 losses during a 14-2 campaign came early in the season when they played without a few of their starters. Kiski avenged their losses to Wickley in a rematch and pummeled league opponents during a late 60s and early 70s period known as the most competitive era for IPSL play. Balanced scoring and a tenacious defensive style that converted numerous steals into extra possessions were keys to the championship run. I'd like to invite Coach Robert Cribbs to the podium to deliver acceptance remarks on behalf of his team. After his remarks, I'd like the team to join us on stage for a photo. But first, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Cribbs.
First, I want to say what a golf team that must have been. I live in central Pennsylvania, and I was in the barber shop with a friend who came in. This friend was a retired dentist from a nearby town, and he said, I said, well, I'm just getting a trim here, and I explained what I was doing, and he said, oh, well, that's great. He said, I said, aren't you on the mailing list for Kiski? And he said, no. He said, I left in '66. I said, well, you know what, Mike? If you had stayed at Kiski, you might have been getting an award on Friday night. This man happened to be a member of the Kiski golf team as a freshman. He then moved with his father to New Jersey, where he completed his career at Blair Academy. His name was Mike Craig. His father was Bill Craig, former athletic director and former basketball coach here at Kiski. So my congratulations to the golfers, and my great thanks to all of you who have had some role in choosing tonight's honorees. It's a great line of people, and as I look at the back of the program, I'm humbled by what I see, because many of those names are real to me, and it's just a wonderful honor to be up here. I couldn't be more proud of a group of youngsters who put Kiski's name on an Interstate Prep School League Champions trophy for the first time, and I couldn't be more pleased to catch up with them, as I've been doing in recent weeks, and as I brought to some completion tonight, to catch up with these folks in their 60s, in their late 60s, and to discover the winners that they have been for the last 50 years. So what I would like to do tonight is to just briefly tell you a little bit about what it was like right in 1971. You've gotten a sampling of it already. And then I'd like to just comment on what I think the roots of success for this team were, and then to cite some of the success that they've had as adults before just offering some brief closing remarks. Quick introduction. I taught at Kiski from 64 to 67 and 1970 to 75. I lived here as a bachelor, as a newlywed, also in Wilson Hall, with my wife Sharon, and then as a parent of a toddler, Gretchen. For the past 46 years, Sharon and I have lived in Lewisburg. We're retired faculty from Bloomsburg and Bucknell universities. Gretchen, who was 6 when we left Kiski, is approaching her 25th year of teaching high school English in Lake County, Illinois. We have 2 grandchildren, Ben, a college senior and baseball player, and Micah, a high school senior. Her specialty over the years has been dancing, but she loves volleyball. It's been a late discovery and hopes to find a place where she can play in college. For 8 years, I was immersed in a boarding school experience that has left me with many memories, including those of the 1971 basketball season. I'll share my thoughts about the time we lived in then, as I've said, our players' success and their success as adults. My sources have been my memory, which can be faulty, conversations with 7 of my players, the 1971 Kiski yearbook, the internet, and Kiski's Vicky Fluhardi and athletic director Mark Rodommel, both of whom have been extremely gracious and helpful. The time we lived in 1971, Kiski basketball players knew little or nothing of cell phones, travel teams, weight training, film sessions, AAU competition, or year-long specialization in basketball or in any other single sport. They chose a sport each season and played it, and they played it well. At the close of the fall season, a portable floor was brought out of storage and installed piece by piece by transforming the macadam surface of our field house into a mini arena, albeit with a few dead spots to challenge the dribbler. In March, the floor was taken up and returned to storage until the following November. Well, what made these basketball players such a success? You've heard a little bit about the timing, the arrival of a couple of players and the maturing of other players. Pete has suggested that he was a little bit of a fouler. I'd like to suggest that, yes, much of the success of that team was because we had 9 football players on that team, including all 3 of Reno Diorio's quarterbacks, Dave Martha, Andy Tonzik, and Jeff Massey, all of whom are here this evening. We had tri-captain at middle linebacker, Pete Monterelli, who obviously is here this evening, running back Randy Coleman, ends Dave Klein and Mitch Weinstein, and solid football reserves Tim Askew and Mark Sieber. None of these latter folks have been able to make it this evening. Add to these players 2 standout soccer players, Rich Miller and Art Masotis. Looking back on it, we were loaded. The versatility of this team was borne out in the paths that our players took after leaving Kiski. Only one player, Andy Tonzik, played basketball in college. Andy played outstandingly for Grove City College, after which he spent a 35-year career in student recreational services there. Pete Martorelli took his basketball talents to Pitt, as you've well heard. I'd like to just add that 342 career batting average, which placed him among the top 20 players in Pitt baseball history. Jeff Massey distinguished himself as an outstanding strong safety at West Virginia Wesleyan, and then coached, I believe, for 8 years after graduation. Art Masotis switched from basketball to soccer at the Naval Academy and still cherishes the memory of scoring a goal against arch rival Army. Mitch Weinstein bypassed college for a professional year of football with the Tampa Bay Bandits in the ill-fated United States Football League. Although basketball didn't determine most of our players' future, they played it very well. The keys to their success, I believe, were their athleticism, their native basketball skills and intelligence, and most importantly, their unselfishness. If we say a player is athletic today, we often visualize a muscularly sculpted player who plays mainly above the rim and who comes up with crowd-pleasing dunks and just wonderful moves. For our players, athletic meant that they were above average in strength, speed, quickness, and agility. And I believe these attributes were reinforced by their multi-sport history. Football players Pete Martorelli and Mitch Weinstein, contrary to what Pete just said, knew how to shoot and rebound while absorbing contact. And the team's undersized center, Art Masotis, used his quick soccer feet to good advantage in his pivot moves and on defense. And point guard Andy Tonzik, a sprinter in the spring, led our quick breaks. Physical condition from starters through the entire bench was good, and the team was fortunate to have no serious injuries over the season. Basketball skills and intelligence, basic things. Each of our players could shoot, pass, defend. They would have loved today's three-point arc. Jeff Massey and Mitch Weinstein were particularly deadly from the perimeter and the baseline, while Andy Tonzik, Pete Martorelli, and Art Masotis combined outside shooting and strong driving abilities to provide a tremendous offensive balance. Shot selection was key to how our team played. Each player gradually began to understand the difference between a good shot and a bad shot. Knowing each other's moves with and without the ball and taking care of the ball with accurate passing kept costly turnovers to a minimum. Finally, defending against the shot without fouling and knowing when to help out a teammate were skills that were refreshed during our time together. But most importantly, I think, unselfishness marked this team. And I'll use Art Masotis' words in a telephone conversation. We understood our roles and didn't care who scored the most points. Unselfishness extended to every player, but especially to those reserves who, knowing that their playing time in games would be limited, practiced every day with enthusiasm and gave their teammates the competition needed to prepare them for each contest. Huge credit goes to Dave Martha, and one of his friends tonight said it to me. He said, you know, Dave Martha was a great leader. Dave Martha, Randy Coleman, Dave Klein, Rich Miller, Mark Sieber, and Tim Askew. And now a quick pivot to our players as adults. I've had a wonderful time reconnecting with these players and hearing about their successes as adults. Some of the fields, and I told them as I talked to them not long ago this evening, that if I didn't get their field quite right, they would forgive me. I wasn't sure about Art. Art's sister helped me out to tell me, sure, it was IT work that Art was doing in industry for most of his life. Here are some of them. High school guidance counseling, you might guess, that's our friend Pete. A real career in counseling high school students. Student leadership, Andy Tonzik. Healthcare consulting, Jimmy Dietrich. Healthcare equipment sales, Jeff Massey. Gas and oil exploration, Dave Martha, and Bill Lay, who's here tonight too. Artificial intelligence research and design, Mark Sieber. Business and industrial sales, Rich Miller. Law, Randy Coleman. Medicine, Joe Franzi. And elite physical and Olympic training, Mitch Weinstein. And then a second for Randy Coleman, abstract painting, a strong avocation which Randy has taken up. What else did I learn from talking with these folks in recent weeks? I've learned how invested they are in their family, and you can see it here tonight as they credit their families, how invested they are in their families, and not just my basketball players that I'm talking about, but all the gentlemen who've been up here accepting honors tonight. In my case, in our case, we're talking about interest in their spouses, their children, and their grandchildren. And to one, they've expressed their appreciation in the role that Kiski has played in their development. I've noted the unselfishness of our bench. You should know that among the folks on that bench, almost every one, and I was impressed by this looking through the yearbook, was not simply giving a lot on the basketball floor, but achieving in the classroom, being a leader in the dorm, in some cases a prefect, contributing to school publications, doing all of the things that made up a busy Kiski life. Without them, we would have not had a championship basketball season. Three members of that bench have invested their talents in society in profound ways. Mark Sieber graduated from Harvard and has for years been a consultant and entrepreneur in artificial intelligence and design, as well as a host of other cutting-edge fields. Randy Coleman, as I just mentioned, graduated from Yale, Georgetown Law School, and has been a career attorney in Florida. He's recently moved to Maryland, where as he renovates his house, he's being sure to also create a studio for his artwork. And Joe Franzi attended Bucknell University before moving on to Temple Med School, and for 20 to 25 years, Joe has been a busy family practice physician in the Philadelphia area. Sadly, three members of our team have passed. Tim Askew was killed in a car accident in Indiana County in 1977. Tim was married and was completing his undergraduate education at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He was 23 years old. I happen to have had Tim in class as well as a basketball player. Wonderful young man from the small town of Homer City. Just a real loss. Dave Klein passed away in October of 1996. I don't know the circumstances surrounding Dave's death, but I have a vivid memory, a brief vivid memory to share with you as a tribute to someone I will always remember as a young man. It was toward the end of our season. The key game in our path to winning the league was a contest against University School in Cleveland. The game had been tight throughout, but as time ticked away, a turnover and a quick basket put us ahead. As our bench erupted in cheers, suddenly my view was blocked by our senior reserve center, 6'5" Dave Klein, who was jumping and screaming ecstatically. I pulled Dave back to the bench, and as the official whistled a University School foul, I said, "Dave, get in there. If this shot is missed, we need to get the ball." Dave looked at me for a second in disbelief, and then hustled to the scorer's table. The shot went in, but as I think about Dave and his leaving us too early in life, I remember those seconds of joy he expressed at realizing, one, we were about to upset a very good team, and two, his sudden change of expression when I asked him to help us preserve a victory. Dave Klein embodied the sacrifice made by all of our reserves throughout that year. A year ago last month, Jimmy Dietrich died unexpectedly. Jimmy was a three-sport athlete with a range of talents and interests. In 1971, he joined Joe Franzi as co-managers of our team. What a couple we had as our managers. A 2-year prefect and cum laude honoree, Jimmy was interested in politics, debate, drama. He sang in a double quartet, participated in the poetry forum, wrote and edited sports news. To borrow a line from Jimmy's remembrance, he was a Renaissance man. After graduating from Princeton University with his bachelor's and Northwestern University with his master's, Jimmy embarked on a long and highly successful career in healthcare consulting. He's survived by his wife Celeste, 3 brothers and a sister, 4 grown children, and counting what I hear tonight, 8 grandchildren. We're pleased to have his wife Celeste and his son Vince with us this evening. Final thoughts. The specialization that has overtaken athletics today has produced strong, highly skilled athletes with dreams of playing on a major college or even a professional team. It's good to hear how Kiski is accommodating its one sport specialist while preserving seasonal sports participation in the lower classes. Each of our multi-sport athletes on that team stood on the shoulders of countless parents, teachers, siblings, and coaches who nurtured them season after season before they arrived at Kiski. As has always been the case at Kiski, accomplishments in classroom and athletics were celebrated, but not ballyhooed. Driving us home after a late season victory, our iconic former wrestling coach Jake Ziegler turned to me and said, "Bob, I'm so glad your players didn't stick their fingers in the air and scream, 'We're number one.'" Well, that was the Kiski way. Whether it was win or loss, you did it with discipline, you did it with character. We didn't stir much excitement in the town or on the campus when we won that championship. They didn't take us through Salzburg on a fire truck. And I suspect that our players going back to the dorm didn't find anybody yelling and screaming for them, but found a bunch of guys studying, reading their books, getting ready for vocabulary tests, or thinking about tomorrow's meet or match. Our season, I would describe, and admittedly, this is through the mind of a much older man, I would describe our season as a quieter triumph of daily effort, discipline, and unselfishness in pursuing a common goal. 50 years ago, those were the hallmarks of a Kiski education. I sense that they remain so today. I hope that our little chapter in Kiski's athletic history, along with all the other achievements being recognized this evening, and all of those that have gone before us, will encourage and inspire the boys in blue blazers for years to come. Could our team come up to the stage, please?
Gentlemen, we can slide this way.
The last team in Kiski's 8th Athletic Hall of Fame class is the 1973-74 swimming and diving team. Like the 1970-71 basketball team, this team will forever be known as the first ever. As I read the text on their plaque, I want to set the scene for a storybook ending. After hundreds of thousands of practice yards swam, countless dives, the entire season comes down to one race, the last race of the league championship meet. 4 swimmers in the Kiski relay will each swim 4 lengths of the pool. If their relaying team finishes first, they capture Kiski's first ever league title. I'll turn to the plaque for the thrilling conclusion of the story. Kiski clinched its first ever independent school swimming league title after winning the last event of the championship meet held at Kiski. In doing so, that 400-yard freestyle relay team set school, pool, and league records of 3 minutes, 20 seconds, and 48/100ths of a second. That title-clinching climax was earned one grueling training yard at a time. The team swam over 200,000 yards in practice with 10 practices each week that included 6 a.m. sessions. Their determination drew them back from winter break 5 days early for a preseason grind that included 14 practices. It was the commitment necessary to accomplish greatness in a legendary season. I'd like to invite co-captain Kirk Frank to the podium to deliver acceptance remarks on behalf of his teammates. After his remarks, I'd like the team to join us on stage for a photo. But first, ladies and gentlemen, Kurt Frank.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good evening, everyone. Since we're telling Kiski stories today, and we talked about how Wilson Hall was a little bit like a tenement, I have the distinguished pleasure to say that I am probably one of few people who spent his entire year, 3 years at Kiski, residing in Clark Hall. Now, I was there as a sophomore, as a junior, as a senior, and I didn't repeat any of those years. And then comes 2013, where I returned to Kiski for the 125th anniversary of the school. And a friend of mine said, let's stay overnight at Kiski. And I said, okay, we'll stay over. Don't put us in a nice dorm. My goodness gracious, I stayed in Clark Hall. Before I moved to the Midwest in 2000, I lived in South Florida for 17 years. Let me just say, on that night in July of 2013, it was hotter than any day I ever spent in my entire time in South Florida. When I first arrived on the campus this evening, I wanted to make a stop at the natatorium. Unfortunately, in Kurt Frank fashion, I was late and the natatorium was closed. The main reason I wanted to stop by is I wanted to breathe in the chlorinated air and relive for just a second, just a moment, the 1974 Kiski Swimming and Diving Team Championship, the first ever that this school won the ISSL championship. People fondly remember it, and we talk about it tonight, of great times in their life. Well, February 9th, 1974 was one of my days to remember. Let me set the stage. It was snowy, it was chilly, it was a February Saturday, and the annual championship meet, with our luck, was at our home pool. There were preliminary races in the morning to determine what swimmers would make the championships that evening. It was the same format that any championship in swimming follows, including the Olympics. Keep in mind, swimming is not normally a spectator sport. It's kind of boring unless you're a parent. But that cold February night in 1974, our home pool was packed with all kinds of spectators. We had students, parents, faculty. It was so jammed that if you can remember, the back of the natatorium, there was a wall there and people were standing up just to see the events that were going on that evening. The other interesting part of that meet, as was mentioned in the beginning here, was it was down to the final event to determine who was going to win the championship, the 400-yard freestyle relay. The University School in Cleveland and Hawkins School near Akron were always the teams to beat, and they were always the championship team. That was not the case that night. All of our swimmers and divers put in outstanding individual performances, but Kiski was a couple points behind going into that final relay race. I acutely remember our coaches telling us, if we win that race, we'll be champions. So I told everybody, just get back from the pool, don't get excited, we're going to win this race. We were all pumped up. The whole team was. Because everyone's effort in the individual races got us off to the right start. We were ready to win this meet. Terry Owens led us off on a relay. Let me just say that I was second, followed by John Superock, the late and great John Superock. Kevin Reynolds was our anchor man. The best part of that race was Terry Owens had such a terrific start that he was ahead as soon as his body hit the water. Terry gave us such a big lead that John and I were able to maintain that lead, and Kevin picked up even more of a lead on the anchor leg. In fact, Kevin was out of the pool. He was putting a towel on, hugging his teammates before the second team even finished the race. That day, we broke a school record in the 400-yard freestyle relay. But more importantly, our swimmers and divers were champions. We celebrated with a lot of hugs and everyone jumping in the pool in great joy. Even our coaches, Jack Pigeon, whose real name is Mr., his first name is Mr., as we can say here. It's not Jack, it's Mr., joined us in that pool. It was a great day for a great team. As I look up here right now, I sadly have to say that at least 8 of our team members are no longer with us. They left us too soon. But I will say, as co-captain of that team, I accept this honor on behalf of our championship swimmers and divers, those that are here tonight, those who couldn't join us, and those who left us too soon. I think everyone in here that was on that team will agree with me that the 6 a.m. workouts and the 6,000-yard afternoon practices were worth every minute of it. And lastly, I want to thank my headmaster and my coach. I'll call him Jack this time, but this is probably only the second time in my life I called him that. Jack Pigeon, for everything he did for our team. Mr. Pigeon, you made us better swimmers, better divers, and true gentlemen. As I told you several times before, you're the greatest. Thank you all very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. A few logistical items to cover tomorrow's recognition during halftime of the homecoming football game. I will then turn the podium over to our Associate Head of School for Institutional Advancement, Steve Szilagyi, for his closing remarks. Steve will then invite all the individual and team inductees in the Hall of Fame class of 2021 to the stage for a group photo. We hope that you will join us tomorrow for a tailgate lunch at the dining hall. It'll be in the dining hall tomorrow, and that will start at noontime. Our soccer team will take on Western Reserve at 1 p.m., and tomorrow's football game will kick off at 2 p.m. as they're playing the Hill School from Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Please meet to the right of the bleachers facing the football field with 10 minutes remaining in the second quarter of the football game. At halftime, we will invite all inductees to midfield, where you'll be announced to the homecoming crowd. Each individual and team will be presented with their plaques and take a photo. We will then exit the field. Thank you again. I'd like to now invite Steve Szilagyi to the podium for his closing remarks.
So congratulations to everyone who was inducted tonight. You guys look great, and you continue to make the school so proud. So congratulations. I'd like to thank everyone here again for being here, for being part of this really important night for Kiski. We look forward to keeping the celebration going this weekend and seeing you all tomorrow. And spread the good news, spread the good word about being back at Kiski. We love having you here and really love being with you tonight. So congratulations. Have a great weekend.